Wanna see the world and sail the seven seas. Wanna be free, unveil some mystery. Ancient times have passed me by, thou will remain. Hold my eyes under the open sky, but here life guides me to my destination. Sail set high, I passed the key.
Light, energy, electricity, and magnetism. We are electromagnetic beings, and what a lot of people don't realize is that we have a certain frequency range, and I can't explain this like a quantum physicist or anything. I've listened to talks with quantum physicists, but again, I can't be bothered to memorize all that stuff so I can repeat it back. The basics is, though, we have a certain frequency range, and if we're exposed to electromagnetic energy that's not resonating with our energy, it can be harmful to us. So when we're actually enclosed in a home that's got all these electrical outlets, we've got the TV on, and it's called blue light when we're watching TV or looking or staring at our laptop, playing video games. We're actually taking this blue light through our eyes, and that's causing a lot of harm to people's health. And that's something that if you want to get more into, which I highly encourage that you do, you watch some videos by and interviews with a man named Dr. Jack Kruse, and that's Kruse, not Cruz or Z as some pronounce it, because this man has delved into this in a deep way. He can explain in excruciating detail how all this works, how it's affecting our mitochondria in our cells. And that's a huge thing that 40, 50 years ago and earlier, we didn't have to worry about that. So that's why I say we really need to earn our health now. We really need to understand and start keeping up with what's going on. This 5G network that's, I'd say, being imposed upon us is going to do huge harm to people. It already is, and some countries are in fact refusing to allow 5G into their cities, and good for them, because in Canada, United States, it's already happening, and I think the amount of people who are going to be affected and have disease at earlier ages is just going to become astounding and horrible to see. But anyway, I'll just leave it at that for now, and I will move on to number 6, which is thought patterns. A little dark in here, so I'm having a hard time reading this. Belief systems. What does that say there? Learning, tolerance, and patience. Being more caring, and releasing expectations. Sorry, actually, I do need reading glasses to read, so I'm trying to do without them for this. But I'm not going to go over all those, but I will give you one simple example to illustrate my point. I'm sure you've seen the following. I've seen it in supermarkets, and I'll use the example of a mother. She's with her young son. And of course, kids, they just want what they want. If they want ice cream, they say, I want ice cream, I want ice cream. And they'll pester their parents until they either give in, or their parents will start getting frustrated with them, and you can't have any ice cream, and they start getting frustrated, and then kids will say, I want that toy, I want this toy, and finally, the mother will get so impatient, she'll say, you need to have more patience, and she'll yell at their kid, and she'll get so frustrated and angry. And of course, a little kid is learning the definition of words by what's being demonstrated or being explained, and most times parents don't explain definitions. They just act as they normally do. They act as they act. And so if you're telling a kid and yelling at him, be more patient, then the kid's going to start thinking that the definition of patience is to lose their patience. And sooner or later, that kid, as they grow up, they're going to get sick of their parents, yelling at them like that, and they're going to start saying things like, I am being patient. You be patient. If they start grasping what patience is about, they'll start putting it back on you and say, well, you're not being patient. So the main point I want to make around that, tolerance, patience, is that most people in fact, want to blame other people for their impatience, their intolerance. And the truth is that impatience and intolerance comes from within us. And if you want to blame other people, that's kind of not taking accountability and responsibility for something that you should be dealing with yourself, and stop blaming other people for it. And this is just so common amongst people. We want to blame other people for, you make me angry, you're making me impatient. But the truth is that people might want to start looking at this in a different way and ask themselves, why am I allowing myself to become impatient as a result of what that person just said or did? And that comes along with the expectations. We expect people to behave in a way that we think is acceptable, and if they don't, we'll yell at them, try to make them feel guilty, even call them names. And this is so common that when people don't do things that we agree with, we'll call them, oh, that's stupid, that's idiotic, are you how could you even think such a stupid thing? And that's a subtle form of manipulation and control that I'm going to talk about that's going on with a lot of YouTubers, in fact, calling other people names just because they don't agree with their diet, or because they're not treating the animals in an ethical way that they think everybody should. Well, just because you have a limited perception about these things doesn't mean that you're absolutely right and everybody else is wrong. And it doesn't mean that there's other perspectives that you just haven't thought of that might enlighten you towards a new way of thinking, which might help you to be more understanding and compassionate of other people. And people have become I find that they're becoming more and more selfish all the time, and it's just a me world, and I want attention, and I'll leave it at that for now. That's basically covering what I missed when I was talking down by the little creek yesterday. So I'll just conclude this now, and now you'll get back to the video from yesterday again. And mention that 7 is to do with occupations, environments, nature, and toxic places versus harmonious places. So just briefly, you can't eliminate the possibility that one's health is being affected by where they're working. If the person's working in a mine, for instance, where there's toxic substances, toxic gases, that could affect the person's health over the years, or it could quickly affect their health, depending on what the gas might be. There's also places that people work where there's nasty people, and it's really hard to put up with working in an environment like that, especially if you're a sensitive person. So the question is, do we try to get out of situations like, a workplace where there's some people who aren't very nice, or do we try to learn to be a little more understanding and patient and tolerant of those people and change our own view about it? Or is it truly a toxic place to work? Now, as I say, with most things, there's no absolute right or wrong, but a lot of times people will say, I want to leave this horrible place, and that place looks a lot better, the grass is greener on the other side type of thinking. And then they get to the other place, they get a job with a different firm or different company, etc. Sure enough, they start finding things to complain about there, and the same cycle happens over and over again. And it is maybe at that point where a person, if they switch jobs and keep finding things to complain about, that maybe they might want to look at their own belief systems and their own attitude about what's going on. So number 8 would be having a sense of purpose. Enthusiasm, a sense of humor, which is really important, and also feeling a sense of hope. More and more in this world, as the prices of everything seems to going up, all the basic needs, food, gas, rent, houses, etc., while the wages are just creeping up, if at all. It's getting harder and harder to make ends meet if you're not a rich person. Most of us are not rich people, and so that can put a lot of pressure. People are working 2, sometimes 3 jobs just to put food in their mouths, and particularly if they have children, they feel that responsible people will, a loving mother in particular is going to do whatever she has to do to make sure her kids have food and clothes and things like that. Meanwhile, they're working themselves, getting frazzled, not getting proper sleep. All those kinds of things can affect health. Another huge topic that I'll get into sometime. Sense of humor. A lot of people take themselves way too seriously. And that's of course because we have this sense of individuality. How dare you say something about that about me that's not true? Well, I can tell you that if you have my version of authentic confidence and self-esteem, people can say things about you that are not true, and you'll just have the attitude, hey, it's your opinion, if that's what you want to think, that's fine. And not worry about it, not get offended, not get upset. But if your whole identity is wrapped up into what you do for a living, your title, it's very easy to upset people like that, to have this great sense of individuality, that think of themselves as a person whose self-esteem depends on their job title, their skills, their looks, among many other things. So eventually I'm going to do a whole video about that, how to be my version of authentic self-confidence and self-esteem. If I didn't have that authentic confidence, what would I have to be confident about? Because I don't own a big house, I don't own a house at all, I don't own a fancy car, 56 years old now, I don't look like George Clooney or any of those kind of guys. I don't have much to impress people with. Yet, I don't feel bad about myself. I don't think I'm a loser or anything like that. But I'm well aware of the fact that there's a lot of people who probably will think that. But if they do, so be it. It's your opinion, you're welcome to it. So one of my goals is to help people who have been convinced, whether it's by ignorant parents or bullies, nasty people on YouTube, etc., that what they were told is not a truth. People are told they're a loser often enough, a few bugs around, they start to believe it, and it gets lodged in their subconscious mind. And that's why hypnotherapy is so important, because belief systems, I'll explain this briefly, can be imprinted onto, let's say, a CD or a record or even a cassette tape. And it's the same with beliefs. They can be imprinted upon what most people call the subconscious mind. And they kind of get etched or imprinted really deeply. Just like a song can be etched on a CD. And if you take those imprints to be the truth that you've been convinced of, then that's the way you're going to act. You're going to think of yourself as a loser, and it's going to be hard to find work because you'll have a certain attitude, you're not worthy, etc., etc. And what hypnotherapy does is it allows us to go in and effectively change those subconscious beliefs, and the wisdom comes in where I talk to people and I help them to understand that those beliefs that were imprinted upon their mind are just the ignorant perspectives and beliefs of them, of others, and that a truly confident and happy person would never try to make another person feel bad about themselves. Now, yes, we joke around. I joke around myself, a little sarcastic sometimes, but my intention isn't to, beat people down. My intention overall is to help uplift people, to help them to realize that, if they have their shot in this world, they have their place in this world, they deserve to have good things happen, etc., etc. But there's so many people who have been beaten down that it's very unfortunate, but just rest assured that if you continue watching some of my videos, that I will say some things to you that are going to make enough sense that will help you to have more of what I call authentic self-esteem and confidence. Okay. The thing about hope, I think it's been pretty well proven that if a person has lost all hope that life can get any better, or at least their version of any better, that sadness can set in, depression can set in. Depression is such a huge thing nowadays. And again, it revolves around this life. We've been convinced that we need to achieve certain things in order to be successful. The President of the United States and Arnold Schwarzenegger says, work hard to be successful. You'll be a winner. All these kinds of things. That's a bunch of bullshit is what it is. A bunch of bullshit belief systems that have been imposed upon you. And because there's so many people that buy into these belief systems, they become accepted by the masses. And it's like mass programming, basically. Another huge topic that I won't get into much for now. But I will be talking about that when I'm talking about veganism and people that are espousing how great veganism is in a little bit, so stay tuned. But anyway, if you've lost hope, whether it's because you don't feel that you've measured up to what your parents said you should do, or your friends, or what society says you should be able to achieve, a lot of people feel bad about themselves because they haven't met those lofty expectations. And to me, that's not my version of being successful. My version of success in life is how happy am I? Do I have peace of mind and harmony? And am I healthy? That's far more important to me. So I'm going to talk about those kind of things in an upcoming video. Number 9, I've got relationships, toxic people versus harmonious people. Again, that's to do with the types of people you hang out with. Toxic people tend to hang out with each other. People who have been beaten down in life tend to gravitate towards each other. People who think that they're so beautiful physically will often only hang out with other beautiful people. If you can, one measure of a truly authentically confident person is that no matter what their job is, no matter if they're a CEO of a company, whether they look like George Clooney, whether they've achieved some level of success, they'll be kind to anybody, no matter what their status in life is, no matter what their skin color is. That stuff's irrelevant, no matter whether they're male or female or transitioning or claiming to not have a gender. For instance, I have no reason not to be nice to people. for any of those things. To me, it's just silly. It's all ego nonsense and programming. So anyway, the people you hang out with, the music you listen to, everything we do is going to be an indicator of what's going on in your thought patterns, what you've been programmed to believe. Number 10, spirituality, clarity, self-realization, so-called enlightenment. I can tell you that I went through this long phase when I was in my 30s of wanting to achieve enlightenment, because I thought being enlightened meant that I could be free of all suffering, mental suffering, like nothing could bother me. I'd always be in perfect harmony. Nobody could annoy me or offend me. I'd always be at peace. And there are these gurus who appeared to be able to do that, and they talk about how they're always in bliss. And I thought, wow, that sounds pretty good. And they'd claim that they had these powers and they could know what was going on in the minds of their disciples, their students. And I thought, wow, that's amazing. We can cultivate all these activities, and then there's these what we call the city powers, where some people claim that they could move objects with their mind and all kinds of levitate, all these amazing things. I thought, wow, I want all those things. And what I found was that I became more hard on myself, because if I became annoyed at something, I'd go, oh, Thomas, you should know better than to become annoyed about that. You shouldn't be perturbed by any of that kind of stuff by now. You should be beyond that. So I'd get annoyed that I was getting annoyed, which kind of sounds silly, doesn't it? But that's what was happening. And I finally started to realize that my opinion now is that a lot of these gurus are actually fake, and a lot of them are hypocrites. They don't live like they say. I've heard many a story. I don't know, I can't confirm whether they're true, but some of the things the behaviors I've seen indicate to me that most of these big gurus, I'm talking about the well-known ones as well, they are not all they were cracked up to be, and there's even more to it behind that, which is a big subject I won't get into for now. But one of the best favors I did for myself was to stop trying to achieve perfection. Perfection meaning that I can never be annoyed. No situation could ever bother me. And it was actually a relief that I could allow myself to be annoyed once in a while. But now the key is taking accountability and responsibility and being able to let it go really quickly. The sooner the better. So I'll get into that kind of stuff, because all these things I've talked about here can and will affect your health. We're living in a world now where things aren't what they were 40, 50 years ago. We got electromagnetic pollution. We've got more stress than ever with trying to eke out a living, to play for a plot of rock and dirt. We're working hard. People are working their entire lives to pay for a plot of rock and dirt, and with a little house on it. And to me, there's nothing wrong with wanting that, but it seems really kind of crazy to me to be having to work so hard just to pay for that piece of rock and dirt that in actuality, believe it or not, you never will truly own, which is another story. But anyhow, I'm going to move on. Those are the main topics in my book, Getting Real in the Unreal World, The Wheel of Health. Unfortunately, my batteries are running out of power sooner than I've been expecting, so I'm probably going to be missing some parts of what I've been talking about. So I'm going to have to move on, because I'm down to my last battery now. And what I was talking about before my last battery died was the fact that I've tried veganism and vegetarianism and I can tell you that I do eat meat, I do eat fish, eggs, and I'm not getting into specifics, but I'm not a vegan or a vegetarian. So what I want to talk about is the more manipulative, outspoken vegans that are out there, and I want to talk about whether it's purposeful or not. I can't say for sure, but what I want to talk about is a method that is working to convert people to become vegans, and that's in relation to hypnosis, which is a topic that I know a fair amount about. So what happens is that vegans will watch these films where animals are being slaughtered in rather horrific ways, and understandably that can be rather traumatizing to a young person. And young people are, of course, in their teens in particular, early 20s, they're looking for direction, they're looking for answers. What's the best diet to eat? And compassionate and sensitive people want to know, how can I live without harming the planet? And then along comes the vegan movement saying, this is the answer here. Watch this video. And they're watching the slaughter of animals. They're playing this music that lends to the mood of how horrible it is to be slaughtering animals. And I'm not justifying that or saying that's okay. But what's happening is that particularly younger people, they're going into hypnosis while they're watching that. Hypnosis, briefly, is a focused state of concentration. If you've ever driven along the highway or the road and you're deeply thinking about something, you could either go past the turn that you were meant to turn at, or there could be music playing, the radio's on, and you're so deeply, intently focused on something that when you do get home, somebody could ask you, what was playing on the radio for the last 15 minutes? You go, I don't know, even though you had the music up loud, because you're so deeply, intently focusing on something. So when you're in a focused state like that, you're open up to suggestion. There's certain people who are very suggestible, and if you're watching a video that's traumatizing you, bringing out emotions, you're going into a trance state. And then if the vegan or the person says, this isn't right, don't you? You know that there's an answer. You should stop killing. If you're eating meat, you need to stop that. It's not right. And they're authoritatively saying what's right and what's wrong. And that's like giving that person suggestions that's going into their subconscious mind. And because it sounds plausible, it sounds reasonable, it sounds good, people will switch like that into becoming a vegan right then and there. And then unfortunately what happens, and this is the part that bothers me, is that people are going vegan, and at first they might feel better because they're eating all this crap food, this junk food before, and naturally if you stop eating that stuff and you start eating healthy vegan foods as opposed to non-healthy vegan foods, people can start to feel better. And they go, wow, this is great, veganism is the answer. And they start telling their friends, and they play the videos with the certain music, and the same thing happens over and over for people. They get into a trance state, and then they're told, this is what you should do, by an authoritative voice, like that one guy, I'm not going to mention his name, but he's one of the main guys in the vegan movement, and he's very vocal, sometimes very nasty, about his thoughts about people that eat meat, what he thinks about them, and he's very black and white about what people should do. And same with who I mentioned before, Freely, she's very black and white, very opinionated about what people should do. And she did a very rather famous rant on a video where she's swearing and using her usual loaded words about, you know, how meaties are eating these murdered dead carcasses. And of course the sensitive people go, yeah, that's just not right, and they switch over to veganism. And so basically what happens is people who are suggestible in particular are buying into these suggestions. They're hypnotized basically, and then they switch over and their mind just, it's like it locks up. They won't listen to any other opinions. They've already heard the one and only truth from the authoritative person who tells them what they should do, because that person makes it sound like they know the answers. And the person from that point won't listen to anybody else. They can go through all these health issues, which is happening to a lot of vegans, and then they'll be told, no, you're still cleansing, you're cleansing all that crap out of you. Just stick with it. And they do, and they get worse. And I'm not going to belabor this, but I'm going to talk about Freely and, you know, what I think about some of the things that she says on some of her videos. And again, people don't know me from the hole in the wall, so she probably won't ever see this. Maybe somebody will tell her, I don't know. But here's what I want to say about this. First of all, I don't have a lot of horrible things to say about Freely. If you're watching this by chance, I'm sure that she has some good qualities to her personality. I wouldn't even be surprised if her intent is actually pretty good. But the next thing I would say is that no one, including Freely, is the one and only authority about what the rest of us should do. She is not the one and only godlike authority who knows beyond all shadow of doubt what human beings should be eating or not. And I'm going to get into another video sometime where I talk about all the silly things that people are saying that proves that we should be carnivore or proves that we should be vegans. Both sides are saying some rather ridiculous things, and I'm going to talk about those. But what I want to talk about now is actually an important topic for not just the vegans who are really, militant. That's the word I was looking for. The militant vegans who are saying things like, oh, you meat eaters, you're eating dead carcasses, and using extreme language to evoke emotions from people. And again, when you're emotional, you're going into hypnosis. If you're sad, you're focused on what's making you sad. You're in hypnosis. You're opening yourself up for suggestions from these people. Whether they're deliberately doing it or those methods or not is irrelevant. That's what's happening. So I want to talk about controlling behavior and manipulators. Go check my camera. The reason I'm re-recording part of this video, the part that I was going to talk about Freely, the banana girl, is because there's a couple things that I forgot to mention before that I wanted to add. And in addition, I want to add something in regards to a recent video that Daphne from the channel Daphne Reloaded mentioned on a video, and so that's my plan. So before I get into Freely, what I'd like to do is talk about controlling and manipulative behavior. So first off, I want to talk about we'll call it the worst form of manipulation, and that would be to murder somebody. I'll give you a couple examples. For instance, let's say there's a gang and they don't want somebody on their turf. Well, if they're a vicious enough gang, if you cross over an imaginary line onto their turf, they're going to murder you. And why? Because it's a form of manipulation that's saying, you cannot do something that we don't like, and if you do, we're going to do something severe, such as killing you. Another unfortunate common example would be when a guy has a girlfriend, or it could be a wife, and she gets sick and tired of his nonsense, his controlling behavior, his jealousness, maybe impatience and other things, and so she leaves him. At first, a guy might try the old pleading with her, promising that he'll change, and if she comes back to him, he promises that he'll do things differently and be a nicer guy, etc., etc. But if you watch my part on how subconscious programming works, you'll know that that's really hard for people to do, despite sincere and the best of intentions. But we'll get into that another time. But let's say that his attempts at trying to win her back by promising to change doesn't work. So what can happen then in these extreme cases is that he can become very angry, and if, for instance, he sees her on another date, that can kind of put him over the edge, because he doesn't want her to be with anybody else. So the man can therefore get so angry that he could, and it has happened obviously very unfortunately, kill the woman. And it's basically saying, you can't do things that I don't approve of. I didn't say that you were allowed to date other men, that kind of thing. And so he'll take the extreme form of ending her life, so she can't obviously date anybody ever again. And of course, the thing I like to stress over and over in my book and on videos I'll be talking about is that you shouldn't blame other people for your own inner anger, your own impatience, your own intolerance, etc., etc. That's all coming from within each and every person. So I will get more deeply into that at some point. So hopefully my point's been made that that's the most extreme form of manipulation and control, is be to kill somebody. The next level down would be using physical abuse and hitting, and threatening would be the next one down from that. But hitting, obviously there's going to be people who hit others when that other person does not conform to what they think the way they should act and react and behave. And that's an extreme form of manipulation and control as well. And then, as I just mentioned, the next one down from that would just to be to threaten the person, and to say, if you don't behave in this way, if you do that again, you're going to suffer the consequences, and I'm going to smash your face in. All kinds of violent threats can be made. And even though the person might not ever truly carry out the violence, a person who makes threats like that is going to come across as though they probably could. And so that's going to often put a person, usually again women unfortunately, in a state of fear. And so they will be afraid that they're going to be hit and abused and things like that. So that's something that I want to get more into, and I think it should be taught to everybody, especially men, that trying to control other people, women, or even other men with men, etc., etc., whatever the combination, doesn't matter. That's being controlling, and it's not okay. But we'll save that for another time. Okay, the next form of manipulation would be those who lie, scam, in order to get money out of people, in order to get all kinds of a list of things from other people by deceptive practices. Now, the next one after that would be what I call putting on an act. And I'll give you another little example here that's a common one. And little boys do the following too, but little girls are kind of famous for the following. They'll have daddy who, of course, wants to do everything for his little girl, and then she gets used to getting, the toys she wants and the ice cream she wants. But then if daddy ever says no, she learns, whether it's just something from within or maybe from watching mommy, that if she does the old pouty face and does the big doe eyes and looks up at daddy and goes, like, please daddy, and then if he says no again, she gets all sad and starts crying and putting on a big act. As understandable as it is that children are going to do those things, we can't blame them because they don't really have the ability to consciously assess and decide in these kinds of ways. It still is a form of manipulation. Now the problem is that if daddy caves in all the time and gives the little girl what she wants, she's going to grow up, she's going to turn into a teen, and daddy will still spoil her little princess. I'll get into princess programming another time as well. But then from there she can turn into an adult, get married, and she'll still put on a little act as though she's like a little girl trying to get her way. And if she doesn't get her way, she'll get pouty, or she'll withhold, affection and put on the pouty face and the whole act. So that's actually a form of control and manipulation. It's a subtle form that many people don't consciously realize that they're doing, but it's really, really common. I myself recognized years ago that I was pretty good at subtle manipulation as well, but I was good at using my words and tactics in order to try and get what I wanted. And I'm not saying I still don't try to get what I want, because we all try to present our argument for the things that we want, and I still have nothing against doing that and against other people doing that. But if somebody says no, I just accept it now. And that's something that I'd recommend that people do. Another variation of that is just calling people names and giving disapproving looks. And this is where the famous rant video by Freely comes into play. She basically likes to call meat eaters, I can't remember the exact words, but along the lines of murderous heathens who don't care about the animals and those kinds of things, and how it's all about the animals who are our friends. And that's also a form of manipulation. It's basically saying, if you don't act or react or behave in a way that I condone or think is okay, or the best way to act and behave, then I'm going to call you names, I'm going to put you down, I'm going to say terrible things about you, until such time as you agree with me. And isn't it funny how if somebody actually was to switch over to being a vegan because of what she said, and she all of a sudden, that person just agreed with everything that Freely was to say, and all these other manipulative vegans, and yes, there are manipulative carnivores and keto people, etc., etc. There's in every category of life there are these manipulators, but I'm trying to make a point here using Freely because she has a famous rant. So is it fair to all of a sudden be nice to people and civil to people just because all of a sudden they're agreeing with what you believe, your perspectives? And I say you can do that if you want, but it's to me it's not even subtle manipulation, it's kind of more blatant manipulation and a control tactic. Okay, so let me get into a little bit more in regard to Freely. First of all, I'm not calling her a bad person, because everybody that I've ever met and gotten to know does some kind of a subtle manipulation, and of course others might be more blatant, but those people generally aren't my friends, so I just notice subtle manipulation. So again, that doesn't make people bad people. I'm not saying Freely's a bad person. I have no doubts that she has some wonderful qualities to her. I would suspect that her intentions are actually pretty good when it comes to trying to save the animals and other things that she's trying to accomplish. And so, in a way, I applaud her for that, for standing up for what she believes. But what I don't think is okay, which I'm going to call people out for, and I will in my personal life as well, is when people try to manipulate me, control me by saying nasty things. And I do eat meat, so if she wants to think that, that's totally okay too, but don't try to call me names. That's not going to change my mind into doing what you approve of. Another thing I just wanted to say about Freely, obviously she's attacked on a regular basis, not physically, but verbally. People say all kinds of nasty things about her, even on YouTube channels. Again, I don't approve of that kind of behavior. That speaks about somebody's character, so I'm going to do my utmost to never do that in regards to other people. But again, I'm going to call out that kind of behavior, because if you ask most people, they'll say, oh yeah, I want a harmonious planet where things are just and fair, but yet people aren't behaving in a way that's ever going to bring about harmony, and they're more bringing about division than anything else. So anyhow, a lot of people I've noticed have said things about Freely's appearance and called her all kinds of things that I'm not going to repeat here, but some very well-known YouTubers have done that, and I don't think that's overly cool. Again, you're free to do it if you want, but you're just kind of displaying what's going on in your own thought patterns and something about your own character when you do that. Personally, I believe she's 40 years old now. I don't think she looks bad for 40 years old, despite what some people have said. My personal opinion might be that she's a tad skinny, and her bones are kind of showing a little bit more than what I think is a healthy look for people. But again, it's her body. She's free to do with it what she wants. And so I think people could more stand to butt out and stop being so critical. And I think all of us could stand to look at our own behaviors, our own ways of acting, and try to correct those first before condemning other people in those kind of critical ways. And that's something I've done over the course of my life. I've tried to correct my own behavior, and so I'm trying to practice what I preach. Let me just have a look here for some things that I might be missing again. Oh yeah. Freely is quite famous for saying about the line about the animals are our friends, and yes, she might have good intentions. Again, maybe she hasn't thought that line through, but I'd like to see her come up to any animals, including the bear that I just chased off. The black bears are kind of a little cowardly. I've encountered a lot of black bears on Vancouver Island, but let's see you come up to a grizzly bear out in the wild in the BC mountains, or any number of other animals, lions, tigers, leopards on the island. We also have wolves and cougars. Let's see you walk up to them and try to be their friend and see how they react to that. No, there's some cuddly, cute little animals that we could say are our friends, but not all of them are, and that doesn't justify killing them. I'm not saying it does. I'm going to get more into all the detail on that in another video. But the next thing I want to bring up in relation to killing animals and whether it's morally okay, the first thing I'd ask vegans is, are you absolutely positive, beyond all shadow of a doubt, I mean 100% sure, that all the indigenous people who've lived on this planet, and some say it goes back a lot longer and further back into history than what we are being told, but let's just say that we know there's been indigenous people around for 2 to probably 10,000 years, I think. Can you actually say that they are all wrong and that you are the absolutely right one? And that's the other thing. Nobody on this planet is the absolute authority on what is right and wrong. Yes, we can all have our opinions. Yes, we can state emphatically and passionately what our opinions are. But again, should we be trying to guilt others into acting and behaving in the way we want? Well, obviously lots of people do think it's okay, but I think if you are really, really honest, and that's something I've done with myself as well, I've been brutally honest with myself about my own actions and behavior, and I'm able to look and say, no, I don't have a right to try and make people feel guilty about things like that. I'm not saying I'm perfect and don't ever do it on a subtle way, but I've made a lot of progress in that avenue, so I'll leave that part alone. But the next thing I want to mention is a lot of vegans, vegetarians as well, claim to be spiritual people, which is cool. I don't really call myself spiritual anymore, but I do believe that there is a soul. We have a spirit that continues on after the body plops over and is buried, etc. And a lot of spiritual people talk about karma, law of attraction, and they'll say something bad happens to somebody, they'll say, oh, it's your karma, you're just getting retribution for what you've done in the past. And of course, karma, for those of you who haven't heard the explanation or definition, it's basically what you do, your actions, and some will also say your thoughts will come back to you for better or for worse. You do nice things for humanity, it comes back to you. If you do rotten things, if you're a thief, do all kinds of deceptive things, it's going to come back to you. So now what does that tell you about saying nasty things about other people if you believe in karma? Shouldn't that be coming back to you? Maybe, I don't know. I don't know if I believe in karma in the way that's generally explained in books like The Secret, the video The Secret. I wrote quite a bit about that in my book, Getting Real in the Unreal World. But I can't claim that I know for 100% fact that I'm right. I could be, I might not be. So, here's just a thought for you. What if not only humans have karma, presuming it's accurate for a moment, what if animals also have some kind of a karmic system? What if every animal that is killed, what if it's because of some kind of a karmic payback? Now, I don't know if this is true. I'm not even saying it justifies killing animals, especially in the big commercial slaughterhouses. That's a whole nother story and matter that I'll address on another time. But can you say with absolute 100% authority that there is absolutely no karmic system for animals? Because as far as I'm concerned, you can't claim that. There's just no way that you can know that there is or isn't. Another thing that people say is that there are no coincidences. So if there are no coincidences, then other people will say that everything is God's will. So if everything is God's will, again, things must be the way they are for a reason. Animals just maybe were put on this planet for sustenance for human beings. Again, I don't know for sure, but neither do you. Again, in my book, I talked about life being like the game of Survivor. Some people believe that we should be trying to outwit, outlast, outplay other people. Other people are trying to outdeceive, outlie, manipulate. They think it's all fair game. The problem is that we're in a modern system now that's come a long way in 100 years and even in 50 years. And we've become used to a lot of conveniences that weren't there 50 years ago. When I was growing up, there wasn't this great selection of foods and, dare I say, supplements that we have nowadays. Foods weren't flown from around the world to our supermarkets. So the one thing I want to mention in relation to that is there's still an awful lot of people on this planet, maybe even the greater majority, who do not have the money to order all these exotic foods that you vegans and vegetarians are getting. A lot of people in poorer countries only have access to some basic fruits and vegetables that they might have growing in their area, and it's common and typical that they have their own animals, and yes, they will eat them. If you're in a hot, arid climate, maybe like the outback, for instance, of Australia, or in places in Africa where it's a lot of desert in the area, they might not be able to grow virtually any kinds of plants and fruits and vegetables. They might solely have to rely on dairy from their animals and eating the animals that they do raise. And so the question I'd have for vegans and vegetarians is, would you actually take that away from those people? The people who cannot afford all those rather expensive supplements. And I've heard a lot of ex-vegans talking about how they're spending $1,000 plus every month on supplements. There's people who aren't making $1,000 in an entire year working full-time in some countries. So if they can't get the supplements that I think most of you will even agree that you do need in lieu of not having animal products and dairy products, etc., what do you expect them to do? Would you take away their animals, which would rob them of their health, just to be nice to the animals? And again, I will get into much deeper into ethics and morals and that category another time, but I just think there's a rather selfish attitude, and people just seem to forget because they live in the United States or Canada or Australia or a few other countries that have modern conveniences that not the entire world has those things. You can't just be selfish. Well, I guess actually you can, but it is rather selfish to impose your beliefs. And I know there's a lot of vegans who, if they could, they'd magically make all the animals disappear and they'd go to some big happy harmonious area of the world so they could never be harmed. I know there's some who would do that, and if you would, you're taking away the food that's allowing some people to be healthy. And let's not forget that by far the greater majority of people on this planet do eat meat. And I've gone to Colombia many times, spent over 3 years worth of time there. Good luck convincing Colombians and other South Americans to give up their meat. It's a staple, and they don't see anything wrong with killing. There are a few vegans down there, but not too many, not too common. So you're still fighting against the grain. But the fact that that veganism is being pushed in such a big way tells me there is something going on in a big way for this to be pushed as it is. To me, there's no question that there's an agenda. Okay, so again, when it comes right down to it, life is like a game of Survivor. Before 100 years ago, if you're one of the pioneers trekking through the woods, what are you going to eat? You're going to eat the basic things that you're able to bring with you on a ship, and then forage for whatever you can, and you're going to eat animals. So again, I just don't think vegans really think things through as to how realistic it is to be a vegan worldwide. Anyhow, I'm going to leave that alone for now, and I'm going to get onto the topic of Daphne, of the channel Daphne Reloaded. And you'll notice in the title I put Daphne Unloaded. Now that wasn't meant to be a slam whatsoever, in case people were assuming that I was about to say something bad or negative about her. Actually, I have some comments to say, some nice comments about Daphne, and I called it Daphne Unloaded because she just recently posted a video at the end of July, and part of the title was, "I'm sorry I pushed veganism on you." And I felt that it was a very heartfelt, authentic video that she did, and because of that, Daphne, if by chance you ever watch this, it was my favorite video because you're showing your vulnerable side instead of putting on that tough act that you often do with all the swearing. And I'm not putting swearing down. It honestly doesn't offend me. To me, it's just words that people use, and I can choose to be offended or not offended. I choose not to get offended by things that people say, even if it's directed at me. It's just people's opinions, and I'm not going to take it personal, and that's where some of my spiritual beliefs come into play. But what I wanted to mention to Daphne is that it can take a lot for people, and she did talk about part of her upbringing, that it wasn't maybe the best, and perhaps I'm speculating from experience here that that's part of where the tough exterior comes from, the swearing, that kind of stuff. Again, do what you want, it doesn't bother me. But I think it is really admirable that you allowed yourself to be vulnerable for that video. And the main point that I do want to make in relation to that video, and again, I'm directing this to vegans, but this is to anybody. It could come under other categories. For those of you who think that it's okay to literally push what you believe onto other people, and then to additionally try to make them feel guilty when they don't go along with the way you think they should act and behave, you might regret doing that someday, because part of Daphne's video was basically her apologizing to her father and to the friend that she was on the phone with. And again, to me is really wonderful to see somebody just being authentic, to let their guard down, to hit, take that wall that people put around themselves to try and stop from being hurt over and over again. And so, I just want to say thumbs up to Daphne for doing that. And be careful of telling people what it is you think they should do, because you might change your mind someday. And if you changed people over to being a vegan and then they ended up having health problems, even if they did it right, you might feel guilty. I'm not saying you should feel guilty, but you might feel guilty if that happens. Now, a little message to Daphne, hopefully you already know this, but just in case, I'm going to speak about myself for a moment here. When it comes to studying about nutrition and well-being, I take full accountability for my decisions. If somebody says something and they sounded so convincing that I switched over, and by the way, I have tried plant-based diets. I was a vegetarian many years ago. I don't feel it worked for me. That's another story as well, but I fully made that decision myself. I would not blame somebody else for talking me into it. I would say, hey, it's up to me to read all different stories, people's versions of what's the best diet, and for me to make my own decision. So I don't think people should feel guilty for convincing others to follow the diet they think is best, but I really think people should have a look at trying to use guilt and manipulation and controlling tactics on others to try and convince them to do what they think is best or right. So with all that, clearly I'm going to have to time how long my batteries last, because my other battery just went dead. But anyhow, I think I might have missed the last minute, so I'll just finish this off by saying that when I made decisions about what diet I was going to do, and it's an ongoing process, I'm always learning still, I took full accountability for the decisions I made. And myself personally, I was one of the first people reading, for instance, David Wolf's Sun Food Diet Success System book back when it first came out. And at the time it sounded pretty plausible, it sounded pretty good, so I gave that one a whirl. But let's say that it just didn't work for me. I wouldn't blame David Wolf for the decision I made. I think all of us could stand to be more accountable and responsible for the decisions we make, especially when it comes to food and nutrition, because I haven't seen anyone who knows all the answers. Some people act as though they do. They're very, very, very convincing. But I would be weary of those who sound so sure of themselves, especially the ones who are only in their 20s, and even all these teenagers who think they've got all the answers as to what we should be eating. I'm sorry, but no, you don't. Come back when you're my age, which is 56, just about 57 now, and let's see how your health is on that diet that you've been eating that you think is so perfect when you're my age, okay? So please stop believing all these people that sound so convincing, because there's a lot of narcissistic people who are rather arrogant, and arrogant people who are rather full of themselves, they're the type of people who won't hesitate to come across as being 100% confident that this is the way it should be done, and they're very convincing. And if you're a person who can easily be influenced because you're searching and you're young and you're impressionable, all I can say is be a little more careful about believing any one source of information. Keep learning. Never think you found all the answers. Just listen to other people's opinions, their perspectives, their thoughts on things. Because the other one thing I forgot to mention is that there's always going to be things that we don't know yet. Hopefully you understand exactly what I mean by that, but there's always going to be things. I'll give you a spiritual example. There's plenty of people who've absolutely claimed there is no life after death. There's no soul, there's no spirit. We're just chemically driven electromagnetic beings. Consciousness is just sparked somehow into existence from these chemicals, etc. I don't know exactly how it all works. I've heard people talk about it, but they will be skeptical until all of a sudden they're on the operating table and they have what's called the near-death experience, or they float out of their body. They hear the conversation that the doctors are talking about. They see the nurses, the doctors panicking. We've lost him. And then after a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, whatever, they see the scene going on around. They come back into their body. And I know people are going to be skeptical about that as well. But there's a whole bunch of different things that people don't know what they don't know yet. And if that happened to you, well, obviously there's people who have had that happen. They're convinced now that there's life after death, and it's changed their perspective on life. So never presume that you know everything. Keep learning. It keeps your mental sharpness going. I'm constantly learning still, even at the age of 56. I've rationalized I'm never going to figure everything out. I just want to enjoy life, keep things simple. And so at this point, I'll say the next part of the video will be coming back from one of the other spots that I was doing. So I hope you enjoyed this little segment.